Hi, and welcome to this next model. In this model, we will talk about synthesizing UX research. Now let's get started. So first of all, what is UX synthesis? So synthesis is basically how to interpret research data, and it helps us to establish a very core understanding of our users and also help us in the long term to develop impactful products. So one thing that we have to understand is doing UX synthesis is one of the most effective research methods that helps us to interpret research data, to extract insights, and also help us to get findings that influence our overall design decision making. It is important to note that during UX synthesis, we can combine the results of multiple research data and then test for the same concepts, and by this, we will be able to apply it to our quantitative and qualitative data. Now let's come to understanding why UX synthesis is important. The goal of UX synthesis is very simple. As I said, it helps us to get an entire snapshot of our data collected. That enables us to get a general understanding of our users' pain points. So we'll talk about how to perform UX synthesis research. I would like to say there are four main methods or four main steps to which we can perform UX synthesis. One, we use interviews, documentation. We use affinity mapping, which we'll talk about in detail. After doing your affinity mapping, you have to get insight statement from the data you collected, and then using open-ended questions. Now let's talk about the steps. Interview documentation. Without documentation, you cannot gather all the data you got from the interview. It is important to keep documentation of all the interviews you perform so as to help you get an overall snapshot of the data that you've collected. Having documentation is important because the data that is gotten can be used and interpreted to get concise information about your users. After getting this particular information, we move to affinity mapping. Affinity mapping helps us to unify large amounts of data that we find by establishing relationship between the concepts and ideas. It also allows us to organize the facts and opinions and issues into taxonomies. We'll also talk more about taxonomies in the next model. This particular taxonomies enables us to help diagnose complex problems and also identify key common issues that we face. We will talk about how affinity mapping is done. First of all, we gather our thoughts on sticky notes. So in this particular model, we'll use Figma to create an affinity map and see how it looks like. After gathering your thoughts on sticky notes, you move to cluster similar thoughts. 3, we name out clusters according to the similar thoughts. 4, we step back and iterate and look at the relationships. And then 5, we create a statement of what we have learned about each cluster, giving us an overall view of our data. After doing our affinity mapping, we use get insight statement. So when everything is grouped, we will begin to see the unmet needs and desires of the people we have interviewed. These help us to get research finding, also known as insight statements. These insight statements point the way forward and are very valuable as they help us to frame open-ended questions like how we might questions, and also gives forms and shape to our subsequent brainstorming session as a team. The last one is to use open-ended questions. Framing your research question well, it is one of the important ways you will need to make sure that you get open-ended answers. These particular responses are important because it helps us to get responsive that brings forth innovative solutions to suit our business and user needs. For example, open-ended questions like how we buy questions are commonly used. In conclusion, UX synthesis is one of the most important in crafting user-friendly and enjoyable experiences. Thank you, and that's all for me now. See you in the next model. Bye.